the governor's office. I don't have all the details on that, so don't expect me to be a source on that. But I did see some of that news, considering I have kids that are of the age that like to do those things. I like water parks too. But this show is about faith, family, and freedom. And that's what we'll be talking about today. Things that basically happen in the state of Texas, but also in other parts of the country, because we know Texas can impact the rest of the country and vice versa. And so really some important issues to talk about. I mean, look, you think about the way life works, at least in our country, it can revolve around the school calendar and a school schedule, whether it's the economy, whether it's your personal life, whether it's some things going on related to policy issues. And so, I might have a little bit more to talk about in commentary as how people's lives adjust to, what are the restrictions now, what aren't, if you feel safe, if you don't. But a lot of it relates to, when we talk about issues on the show, are issues of religious freedom, marriage and family, and pro-life issues. Later in the show, we're going to have Congressman Van Taylor, who represents the 3rd District, the 3rd Congressional District, the North Texas area, parts of Collin County, and that area north of Dallas. He served in the Texas House, Senate. I'll do a better job of introducing him when he comes onto the show in a few minutes. And we appreciate that we're going to have him on to talk about what's going on at the congressional level as it relates to religious liberty and other issues that we care about. He was a part of a private meeting that we had with our supporters and our Attorney General Ken Paxton earlier this week in the Collin County and Dallas County area to talk about what's been happening lately and how, and at Congress, how that relates to some of our issues. And there were a lot of questions asked about things related to the coronavirus, the impact on families because churches were shut down for a while, or they were at least not allowed to operate at any level that seemed to, allow for people to participate there. And but also issues related to the economy. And look, I'm just talking about this. There are big runoff elections coming up here in the state of Texas. Maybe it's a part of your area. I know where our office is. It touches on some of those areas in central Texas. The show broadcasts in 44 counties, and as far as the radio show on the bridge. But we got over 250,000 supporters on Facebook Live right now. As a matter of fact, share this post as we get into some more of those details. You might be saying, wait a minute, what? There's an election? I thought the election was in November. Not so fast, okay? There are runoff elections for Texas House, also State Board of Education, a lot of congressional districts in the state of Texas. Some of these districts, whoever wins in the primary is... It's real important who's elected at the primary level in the political parties that are on the ballot. And a couple of big races. HD 47 is in the Austin and West Central Texas area. That's a Texas House race. There's also a House race for Hays and Blanco County. That's going to be a huge runoff. A lot of attention on that issue. You can go to txvaluesaction.org to see more information about those election issues. But June 29th is the first day of early voting. I'm told that mail-in ballots have already arrived for people that typically do that, that'll start mailing those in. You might have seen the Supreme Court said not everybody's going to get one of those. So as far as that issue relates, it's not everyone that's going to be doing the mail-in ballot thing. I saw an interesting comment, too, by Kellyanne Conway as, some reporters were asking questions about, suggesting that it was going to be some type of struggle or burden if everyone wasn't, or a large amount of people weren't allowed to do mail-in ballots, because that's usually not how we do it. And she said, look, and this must have been a reference to a popular place in that area, and I think I'm saying this the right way. If people can wait an hour for a cupcake at Georgetown Bakery, I think it's reasonable to expect that they'll wait, the importance of waiting for a certain amount of time to go cast your ballot. She always has a great way of really handling the media, and that's why she's one of the best as a spokesman for President Trump. But I catch some of those things on social media from time to time. But, earlier this week, we saw the announcement from President Trump indicating and making it clear that churches are essential. We put out some information in that regard, and we're very encouraged to hear the president come out and say that. That's something that our governor has said for quite some time, and making it clear that churches can reopen. But I think there's maybe a little bit more attention on this issue as you get now towards the end of May. This has been going on for quite a while, particularly because it's Pentecost Sunday coming up. And a lot of churches were saying this is when they were looking at maybe a date where they'd feel more comfortable reopening more in a robust way. So we'll see how that comes about. And look, if you need information about that, about the guidance for churches, and these aren't requirements. The government is not telling you at the state level exactly what you must and must not do, and you might be punished. These are guidelines, and I think that they can be considered prudent recommendations. Some I think might be a little too much, but I think people are doing their best they can. But it does not restrict the amount of people that are going to churches. All these details about 25% and 50%, that has nothing to do with the amount of people that can go to churches in the state of Texas. Those are related to businesses that were not open before. And so that does not include the churches. So want to make sure you're aware of that. But if you want to know what those guidelines are and have some frequently asked questions and answers to those, go to txvalues.org. I see it's right here on our homepage. Read the FAQ, Texas Church Reopening Frequently Asked Questions. Check it out right there. We're always trying to produce great resources for people so they can have an understanding of what's going on the issues we care about. And, look, while some of these concerns in this discussion has cooled off a little bit, we're still not back to where we were, certainly as it relates to the economy, people's understanding what people's freedoms are on these issues. So we're going to continue to post this information and make sure that people are aware of it and they have good information that's accurate. I mean, our goal is to make sure that you've got your freedoms and you're exercising them more, and you're not so worried about what you think maybe the government said, because that's where a lot of them thrive. All right. They thrive in this space of hoping that you're worried and you're not sure and you have doubt about what your rights are. I mean, it's pretty clear in the First Amendment of the Constitution what your rights are, particularly as a church. And so, but we'll be talking about that in just a few minutes with Congressman Van Taylor. My team's going to give me the thumbs up when he comes on. But we did have a great discussion with him and Attorney General Paxton earlier this week on these issues. And if you want to be a part of one of these events, these are private, exclusive events. We're doing one for the Houston area on Tuesday of next week. They're from 6 to 7:30. At least the one is coming up in the Harris and Montgomery County area, not just Houston. But I think I'm going to be the first to announce this. Congressman Kevin Brady has now confirmed with that. We're going to have a couple of state representatives on there, some folks that have been involved in our issues that are not elected officials, grassroots people, and really courageous people that have been a part of being a strong voice on our issues, success stories that have happened over the year. Because as we're almost into June and as we're at the end of May, these are big fundraising times for us because we end our fiscal cycle at the end of June on June 30th. It's been a tough time to try to raise money for nonprofit efforts, but we're hoping that people can see the value in the work we've done, the victories that we've been a part of, but also the way that we've been able to help people navigate a very challenging time. And sometimes we've had to really push back a lot against the government. We've had to push back against a lot of these local governments, but at the same time, walking side by side with nonprofits and faith leaders, a lot of pastors. We've had several private pastors calls, and some we did a teletown hall with the lieutenant governor as part of our role and our way to make sure people know what their rights are, but also to be encouraged and to walk alongside them. We had several issues that we came up that we were able to help get resolved without litigation because we were able to help people see what their rights are and really how to do something with them. Because for us, it's not always about can we pass a law, can we go to court and win a particular issue. It's really about how we can help you exercise your rights and not have to get entangled in legislation or a court issue. And so that's something to be mindful of. One of the things that we did, and I'll talk about with Congressman Van Taylor, is sign on to a letter that was sent to Congress about this concern about how churches are being treated and whether or not you're going to see issues related to liability. Churches being afraid they may be held liable if someone gets the coronavirus. We don't want churches being afraid that they're going to get sued and decide not to reopen. That is not how things should be working. And so we're going to see if we can get something done at the congressional level to give some people of faith some support. But we know a whole lot more churches are going to be opening up this week, this weekend. And so we want you to be encouraged. Go to txvalues.org. see that information. One of the questions that we still get asked the most, what are the capacity limits for churches in the state of Texas? There are none. Our state government is not requiring that only 25% or 50% can show up in your capacity. Now, you might decide as a church that you want to limit the amount of people that can come versus what you usually do because you see that as a safe practice, and that might be prudent. That's fine. If that's what you decide to do, we're not trying to put pressure on churches to tell them to to disregard any common sense safety measures, social distancing in that regard. We're just trying to make it clear so people can know what their rights are, and they're not deciding to just not open it at all or to limit the amount of people that come because they're afraid the government is going to punish them. So you'll hear us continuing to talk about that in a week where you'll probably see a lot more churches, at least from what we're hearing, that are going to open up. And so one of the things that we did last week, though, was announce a big announcement, and I want to make sure you didn't miss it, that right towards the end of the school year, Austin ISD canceled their sex ed in May. That was the first week of May, and that was a lot of it, our opinion, was because of the concerns that people had about how radical it was, how pro-LGBT, how pro-abortion it was. And so right before school ended about the first week of May, we were able to secure that victory. So I want to make sure you get a chance to see that because we want to build on that momentum moving forward. But that matters in who you elect. I mentioned as we started this program, runoff elections start really in about 30 days or so from now. June 29th is the first day of early voting. People are already getting mail-in ballots to submit back in. And so you need to figure out if you have a runoff election in your area, and you likely do, whether it's the local level, whether it's the congressional level, or the state level. They are coming up, and you want to be equipped. And you may not. Maybe you're new to Texas or you moved or whatever. You moved to a different county. Update your registration. Get that voter registration card in. That includes me, okay? I moved recently at the not that far, but in the same county that I live in. So I got to remind myself as well. Make sure I took care of that. But so it's not always like if you're, you think, oh, well, I've lived in Texas all my life. Well, maybe you moved to a different county. So make sure you're in good shape. So when you go to vote for the runoff, you don't have any issues that come up and you realize, oh, I had to update my registration. And so take a look at that and make sure you're ready because, the issues we work on, they hang in the balance depending on what happens in some of these Texas House races and Senate, or they could. There are a number of seats where there's a lot of activity that relate to the runoffs, particularly HD 45. The state representative in that area is very against religious liberty issues that we've worked on. She supported essentially Chick-fil-A being banned from opening up at the airport in San Antonio. Remember, there was that religious liberty law, the Save Chick-fil-A religious freedom law. She was against that. She was one of the members that helped take that down. When at first we were able to revive it, we said we resurrected it and got it passed. But these are pretty important issues that relate to religious liberty and others. So you want to take a look at that to make sure you're informed on what's going on in your area. And I get it. School ended. There's a lot been going on with the coronavirus and restrictions and keeping your family safe and what's the government telling me to do? How can I push back? How can I now reopen my business, right? You're just trying to make ends meet, or you're trying to make sure you can keep your staff together and take care of their families, right? So I know there's a lot been going on, but a very important election that's coming up in about 30 days. Runoff elections for the state of Texas are going to make a big difference in what happens at our state legislature. There's redistricting coming up in the state legislature. That's going to have an impact on what the districts look like, and that can definitely have an impact on elections at all different levels. But I want to welcome to the show Congressman Van Taylor. He has been a great friend of ours for many years. He's got a long history in the state of Texas, 7th generation. That's got to go back to the Republic, because I know I'm 5th generation, and I get pretty close to that. But he's had quite a legacy of public service. He's a decorated Iraq war veteran. He served in the United States Marines. He was a Eagle Scout, if you want to go back even farther, but then got into public service representing Texas House of Representatives from the North Texas area, and then served in the Texas Senate, and now is a member of the U.S. Congress from the 3rd Congressional District in North Texas. Congressman Taylor, welcome to the Texas Values Report.
Hey, great to be on with you.
Well, we had a nice conversation earlier this week. You were part of a meeting that we had with a select group of folks in the North Texas area, getting to visit with some constituents and people that care about the issues that we care about. We're into summer. A lot of people are off. Many kids are off, or this was their last week, some the week before. But Congress is still working. And there's been a lot of activity up there, and rightly so. But at the same time, there's been a lot of different things to navigate. I mean, one of the things that we talked about on the call, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on, is a lot of discussion about the issue of religious liberty as people have growing concerns about the role that the government is playing in restrictions and recommendations and suggestions and guidance on religious liberty in churches. We saw our president, it's been about a week, come out and say and kind of reiterate earlier this week that churches are essential. We've seen our governor do that, but we've also seen a lot of friends talking to Congress about this issue. Tell us a little bit about how what some of the conversations that your fellow members of Congress have been having, and how you feel about the issue of religious liberty in these trying times.
Well, I'll start at the beginning. When the colonists signed the Declaration of Independence, they actually wrote down in the Declaration of Independence, to secure these rights, just governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. I mean, the purpose of government, according to the founding fathers, was to secure rights, and one of those rights is the right to freedom of religion, right? The right to practice your faith as you choose. And that is, so that's to me, is a fundamental and central tenet of the American system. I mean, and so I've always stood on the side of religious freedom, religious liberty, and an honor to serve side by side with you, Jonathan, everything that you've done to protect religious freedom and religious liberty. And, COVID-19 has presented a particularly difficult set of questions, but we want to err on the side of liberty and freedom, that those things are very important and something that we need to stand up for.
Well, and there are a lot of large churches in the district that you represent, and that's a good thing. A lot of folks there, that are, and I was mentioning this as we were getting the show started, with Pentecost Sunday coming up. There's a lot of churches that, we were having private conversations with pastors, giving them guidance and insight throughout this process. Many of them kind of looking at that as a date to shoot for. As it's not always easy to kind of sudden turn around and run things up. They've got to navigate a lot of different personalities of people that come to their church, many who support the religious liberty of the church, but also have well-meaning and legitimate concerns about safety, so they want to make sure people are safe. But we're kind of far down the road, so I think we're going to see a lot more churches take that step. And, I know you've been very active in that district, and so has our organization, and a lot of good people in that area of Texas. And, one of the things, a group that's in that area is our friends at First Liberty Institute. And the lawyers
Absolutely.
Led by Kelly Shackelford and others, they put out a letter recently that we signed on to, expressing concerns and really asking Congress to consider the issue of protecting churches so they're not in issues where they have these frivolous lawsuits filed against them, creating more fear about opening. I know that's something that's made its way to Congress and has been talked about, and I'm sure you've had some conversations about it. It seems unfortunate that that it's a conversation we have to have, but I can understand where they're coming from with the churches wanting to make sure that they don't have. There's not an additional worry that they have to have when I'm sure many of them are trying to be prudent, but they want to focus on opening and serving their people and preaching the Word of God.
Absolutely. The liability issue is a very real issue. Texas has been very successful in reining in liability and being smart about it. I mean, people that act with gross negligence should be held to account, but you don't want to allow the trial bar to kind of run the table on business and make it so that you can't do business and you can't have a church service and faith. And quite frankly, this is somewhat novel. I mean, right? You've got literally churches worried about legal liability because of a disease, and so this is something. And due to that novelness, I think you want to step up and have the federal government take a role and protect religion and protect faith as well as businesses. And I'm just going to say right now, I think that's going to be a challenge for my Democrat colleagues. Their perspective is not to forestall lawsuits. In fact, in my time in Congress, I've seen them on the other side trying to help create more torts and more ways for people to sue. And that's just kind of how, from what I can tell, that's sort of how my Democrat colleagues are wired. I mean, they think that lots of trial lawyers is a good thing, lots of lawsuits are a good thing, and that's why they keep trying to come up with new ways to create new kinds of lawsuits, which in turn makes it harder to do something that is a fundamental right in our country, which is the right to practice religion and practice your faith as you see fit.
We're talking with U.S. Congressman Van Taylor. I'm holding up a great-looking picture of you, Congressman Taylor, from your website. He represents the 3rd Congressional District in the North Texas area, just northeast, if you will, of Dallas. Look, and these concerns are legitimate. I mean, we see what's happening in California. The Ninth Circuit, courts and governors and government officials shutting down churches, preventing them from opening up at all. I mean, it is out of control. We've seen churches that have had to file lawsuits just to have parking lot services a couple of weeks ago, right around Easter. And since then, we've even seen concerns in our own state of Texas, local governments like San Antonio that have been really, playing around with words in a way that I think has confused a lot of churches. That's the feedback we've gotten about what their rights are. And so, we've seen it in Travis County and other parts as well. And that's not a good place for the church to be, to feel like there's confusion, because unfortunately many of them will decide, we don't want to end up in court, because that's not what they do, right? And so this fear takes over. And so I think the more that we can look at doing to have safeguards in place, there's a valid reason for that. And some of that is because local government officials have gone too far with some of the rights that we've had. And we can't talk about, I say you talk about the 3rd district, you talk about the congressional district, you talk about the area that you represent. I know that earlier this week, just a few days ago, something happened that I know that was, really, I say noteworthy in that area, the passing of Sam Johnson, someone who, like yourself, have served in the military and served his country well. The legacy that you have of military service and history in our Texas is incredible. His as well. I'd love to hear you just, I know you shared a little bit about him on social media.
Sure.
and the relationship that y'all had.
Yeah, Sam Johnson was a legend. I mean, that's the only way to put him. I mean, he was a tremendous patriot. He served, 2 lifetimes of careers. I mean, the first one, 29 years in the Air Force. He shot down his first MiG in Korea, was a Thunderbird after the Korean War, which is the Air Force's precision flying team. He loved flying. He served a ground tour in Vietnam early in the war, and then was flying in his second tour in Vietnam, and was flying a fighter jet, which is what he loved to do. And he was on a bombing run, and his gun jammed, and he circled back around, recycled the gun, and went back in for the second bombing run, and was shot down. And he was captured. He was injured very badly, and actually sustained damage to his hand, that he was never able to use his hand properly again after that after getting out of that plane. And he spent almost 7 years in the Hanoi Hilton, and 42 months of those were in the solitary confinement. And of all the challenges in the 20th century, the Hanoi Hilton is probably the single greatest for our men and women who put on the uniform and served our country. And Sam Johnson really distinguished himself there. He He never said a bad word against the United States. He never signed a confession. He never broke, and he was so unique in that when the 1969, when Ho Chi Minh died, the North Vietnamese took all the American POWs out of their individual cells, now solitary, and let them live in a group setting, which was, as I think we can all appreciate how much better it is to be with other people, except for one guy, Sam Johnson, because he just wouldn't break, and that really irritated the North Vietnamese. And Sam finally went on a hunger strike, and he was planning to starve himself, but they wouldn't let him get out of solitary. And he was so close to dying that Admiral Stockdale said, "Sam, you feed yourself. We're going to go on a hunger strike." So literally, all the American POWs went on a hunger strike to get Sam out of solitary, and that worked. He got out of solitary, and I'll just say that one thing about Sam Johnson that's and then he came back to Texas, his beloved Shirley, his family here in Texas, and he became a home builder, and then he ran for the state house, served in the state house from '86, and there was a special election for the 3rd District of Texas in 1991. He ran for that seat and won it, and served in Congress for almost 30 years, so another lifetime of service in the U.S. Congress. And he really was an incredible man, and he had deep faith. He's extremely strong in his faith, and there's no doubt in my mind that sustained him in the most difficult of times. And I'll make one other comment. I mean, if there's anybody I've ever met that had a reason to be mad about the world, it'd be Sam Johnson. But he never was. He's always smiling. He's always happy. He's always willing to laugh. I mean, he had a positive attitude about life, and clearly that was instructed by his faith.
Well, look, and we talk about some of the issues that we've all been dealing with the past 2 or 3 months, and they've been struggles. There's no question. And people have lost businesses. People have lost their lives to this virus, and so you think about public service and how difficult it can be and what it means, right? The meaning and the principles in the Constitution that we think about, they're important when we try to balance these roles of government. And then you look at people that are in public service and also served in the military. We had some great celebrations of Memorial Day and reminders earlier this week. You served in military service, so did Sam Johnson. I mean, to be in that level of public service, these are special people, and I've just seen so many. I don't know that I ever met Sam Johnson, but I know that just from what I saw and what I've read, what a tremendous legacy, and what a Texas legacy, but also what an American legacy of public service that it's probably hard to match. And those things, I think, also can be very motivating to people like yourself that then come in that next round to continue that legacy in some way. And it's truly special, and as we think about what it all adds up to as well. I mean, and it's not so much about numbers, but how we're doing as a country and economy does matter. It can impact people's well-being. It can impact the well-being of the church. I do think there's some things that are encouraging about the direction of things as far as the economy and how Congress is handling it. What's your feel on where we are now and where we're headed in the way that Congress is trying to help have a positive impact on these issues?
Sure. Well, look, there is still a lot of pain and a lot of dislocation and a lot of difficult times yet ahead for a lot of Americans and a lot of Texans. But I will point out that in Collin County, the unemployment claims over the last month have dropped almost in half, and so that's a good sign. That's what you want to see. And I think that, we've seen Texas, particularly in the areas that are led by Republicans. And I think, who you vote for matters, who you elect matters. It makes a difference, who's running the place. They shut down a little later. They didn't shut down quite as hard. They've come back a little sooner. And as a result, the economic damage is less. When I talk to my congressional colleagues in other parts of the country, in bluer parts of the country where their governor or county judge shut down earlier, shut down harder, is still shut down, or is opening up more slowly, in turn, the damage is greater. The more businesses, the longer the economy is going to shut down, the more businesses are going to fail. And the more businesses fail, the fewer jobs there are. And so it's, I think you're going to see Collin County, my county, is going to be leading the recovery. I think Texas is going to be leading the recovery for the country. And I think that the United States is going to lead the recovery for the world. I think the whole world is taking an economic hit from this, and there are hard days ahead, but I'm optimistic for the future and for us coming back.
Well, and I think, look, one reason to be optimistic is because of your leadership, particularly on the issues that we care about as an organization, faith, family, and freedom. And we've tried to remind people, that includes the health of the economy. We know that families do better when they're not dealing with financial strain, on top of the fact they couldn't, for a little while, it was hard for them to go to church. But I think people made some sacrifices. They tried to be understanding. Now it's time to continue to get back to work, to continue to open things, to do things the best as we do as a country, and to trust Texans and the American people. And we're so thankful that you're a part of that leadership, as you always have been, serving your district, but being a great voice throughout our state, and I'm sure other parts of the country as well. So we wish you and your family well, Congressman Van Taylor, and we thank you, and God bless you for being a guest today on the Texas Values Report.
It's great to be with you, Jonathan. Thank you for all you do to keep Texas free.
Hey, man, thank you, sir. Look, they got a lot going on in Congress these days. It's almost June, and they're still working. We'll see what happens a lot. News continues to come out daily on things that Congress is trying to do to try to get the country headed back in the right direction economically, to preserve the rights, to make sure entities like Planned Parenthood don't continue to get money, because it's really not related to some of the issues we're dealing with now, if ever at all. And so, but also a little reminder, don't forget about us at Texas Values. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization. Your donations allow us to continue to do the work that we do. Make a tax-deductible donation today at txvalues.org. And we'll talk to you next week on the Texas Values Report.